meeting is indispensable in order to understand and forge a common understanding of the situation in the Middle East. We share a common goal. We want to avoid a conflagration, a wider war in the region. It is important to underline our trustful discussion and meeting today is an expression of the very close and good partnership between Jordan and Germany. Let me reiterate in all clarity, we condemn the attacks by Hamas terrorists on Israel in the strongest of terms. Israel has the right to defend itself against this terrorism. Security in and for Israel must be restored, and Germany stands in solidarity and steadfastly on Israel's side. Let me again warn against and explicitly warn against Hezbollah and Iran interfering in this conflict. Together with our allies, we as federal government do our utmost so that this conflict doesn't escalate any further. I'd like to also commend and thank Foreign Minister Baerbock for her commitment. As you know, I'm going to travel to Israel on a visit and discuss the situation together with the Israeli Prime Minister. Your Majesty, we both are concerned about the humanitarian situation in the region. We continue to lend humanitarian assistance in order to alleviate the suffering of the civilian population, and we advocate for a humanitarian access to the Gaza Strip. There's a pressing need that the suffering civilian population in Gaza, which are used by Hamas as human shields, receive humanitarian assistance, water, food, medication. We are horrified by the inhumane violence committed by Hamas perpetrators, but it is important to differentiate. The Palestinian people, men and women, are not Hamas, and the Hamas doesn't have the right to speak on behalf of them. The Palestinian people in Gaza, too, are Hamas's victims. Your Majesty, I'd like to pay my tribute and respect for your stabilizing and you and your country's stabilizing and mediating role. In the past years, you've done a lot, visibly and invisibly, in order to successfully contain such escalations time and again. I'd like to also highlight your important role, which you, Your Majesty, play with a view of Jerusalem. We agree that the status quo of the holy sites needs to be preserved. When it comes to hosting hundreds of thousands of Syrian and Palestinian refugees, your country has done marvelous things. We will not abandon you in this very important and difficult task. Germany is the second largest bilateral donor for humanitarian assistance. I thank you for your commitment and the commitment of your kingdom, and I pledge further support. Germany will lend support. Allow me to also talk about our bilateral relations aside from the crisis in the Middle East. We're celebrating the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between Germany and Jordan. We're talking about a very deep and reliable partnership here, and we want to continue to foster and promote these relations in the future. When it comes to implementing the reform agenda in your government and when it comes to tackling the repercussions of climate change, we want to cooperate closely. I'm happy that important cooperation projects between Jordan and Germany will be signed. These projects contribute, for instance, to adapting the water sector to climate change, and we support the Jordanian education sector and much more. Also, when it comes to attracting skilled labor and the migration of skilled labor, we cooperate. I am also happy about the fact that we are going to be hosting the next Global Summit for the Rights of People with Disabilities in 2025. Your Majesty, thank you very much for coming to Germany and the good discussions that we had.
Mr. Chancellor, Your Excellency, thank you as always for the tremendous and gracious hospitality that we always have when we're here in Berlin. We meet today in extremely difficult times, but it is important that we do meet as we work all together to end the extremely tragic and dangerous situation unfolding in Gaza. Thousands of innocent civilians have been lost, Palestinian lives, Israeli lives. These are sons, these are daughters, these are mothers, fathers. husbands and wives. Many more lives are at risk. Hundreds of thousands have no access to food, water, electricity, and other basic services. This is unacceptable on all levels, legal and human. This year is already the bloodiest year for Palestinians and Israelis in recent memory. It will get much worse unless we stop this war and the human catastrophe it is creating. And stop it we must. We must all stand against all forms of violence and with its victims, no matter their identity, nationality, or religion. And Your Excellency, the whole region is at the brink of falling into the abyss that this new cycle of death and destruction is pushing us towards. The threat of this war expanding is real. The cost this will bring on all of us is too much to bear. All our efforts are needed to make sure we don't get there. And we must immediately, as you pointed out, Your Excellency, get humanitarian supplies. We must protect civilians. International humanitarian law and our shared human values, indeed our common humanity, are clear on the obligation to protect civilians and in condemning targeting the innocent. We condemn the killing of civilians on both sides. The whole world must do so. Our moral compass has to encompass all to be moral. Your Excellency, the way forward demands political and not only security solutions, and restoring a meaningful political process that can take us to peace on the basis of the two-state solution is the only path to a secure and safe future for Palestinians, the Israelis, and equally as important for all of us in the region. The challenge is enormous, but our will to realize it must be unwavering for the sake of all our peoples who have suffered enough war, enough pain and loss, for the sake of the innocent victims who fell and continue to fall since this cycle of violence erupted over 10 days ago. Your Excellency, your role is crucial for the stability of the region. Your support for Jordan has been unwavering, and as you've mentioned, over the past 70 years of diplomatic relations, we have had an ability to build an unshakable foundation of exemplary cooperation. And despite the crises, the conflict, and the regional and global challenges, this remains constant. Your support has been instrumental to our development efforts, and we are highly appreciative of your continued commitment. We have just concluded, as His Excellency said, a round of very productive discussions to explore opportunities for advancing our cooperation in energy, water, trade, vocational training, and industry. And our countries are preparing to take a major step in bolstering cooperation in human capital with the planned launch of the German Center for Labour Mobility in Jordan to better equip Jordanians seeking job opportunities. We're also deeply appreciative of Germany's leading role in supporting refugees, as you said, Your Excellency. This is especially important for Jordan, where refugees make up over a third of our population. Germany remains a leader in offering and galvanizing support out of a deep awareness that standing by refugees and their host communities is a global moral imperative and a shared responsibility. Your Excellency, I hope that we will meet again soon under better circumstances. Again, I wanted to thank you for the support that we get, not only from you, the German government, but the German people. And I thank you for the generosity that you always show us, and hope to see you in our country in the near future. Dankeschön.
We have time for 2 questions per side.
Good morning. Your Majesty, so in the light of the current tragic situation and event that's happening, what is required from the international community to contain the cycle of killing and violence that you've referred in your speech? Thank you.
I think, Your Excellency, if you'll allow me, I think all of us understand in the international community that it is imperative to work on de-escalation as quickly as possible and to be able to protect the innocent civilians on all sides of this conflict. So we will have to see what happens in the next week or so. I know that all of us have been talking to many of our colleagues around the world. His Excellency is on his way to Israel today. President Biden is coming to Jordan tomorrow. So I understand, and I think all of you understand, that everybody understands the seriousness of the situation, of how we need to work together to de-escalate, stop the violence, but equally as important to think what happens afterwards. Enough is enough. We cannot continue this cycle of violence every single year unless there is a political horizon that brings Israelis and Palestinians together, that then allows Israelis and Arabs to come together. This will continue to be a cycle of violence that none of us can afford.
My first question is to the King of Jordan. You've just warned once again of significant consequences, particularly for civilian lives in the region. What does that mean for Jordanian solidarity? Would you be prepared to take in more Palestinian refugees? And did you receive pledges of support from the German Chancellor? And Germany says that its reason of state is the security of Israel. Germany also has significant military capabilities based in Jordan. Would it be able to draw on that to secure Israel's security? Und Herr Bundeskanzler, Sie reisen als erster europäischer Staatschef in
Federal Chancellor, you are traveling to the region as first European head of state. What are you going to take away from this meeting to this meetings? And against the backdrop of the threat to Jewish life in Germany, is the federal government planning something in order to combat anti-Semitism in Germany?
Well, thank you, ma'am. I think on the first part of the question, on the issues of refugees coming to Jordan, and I think I can quite strongly speak on behalf not only of Jordan as a nation, but of our friends in Egypt, that is a red line. Because I think that is the plan by certain of the usual suspects to try and create de facto issues on the ground. No refugees in Jordan, no refugees in Egypt. This is a situation of humanitarian dimension that has to be dealt inside of Gaza and the West Bank, and not to try and push the Palestinian challenge and their future onto other people's shoulders. As for your presence of troops in Jordan, I think the German military commitment in Jordan is pointed in another direction, which is very important, and I think a question best answered by the Chancellor.
Ja, schönen Dank. Und in der Tat, wir haben eine gute, enge Zusammenarbeit. Und ich bin sehr dankbar.
Thank you very much. We enjoy a very good cooperation. I'm very grateful for the opportunities that our German soldiers have on the ground. It's been there for a long time, and the aims and the objectives are directed in a different direction in Jordan. As for your question, what we can do, I think it is important that we make it clear, and I want to reiterate this when I'm in Israel. We stand by Israel's side, and we support Israel. It has every right to defend itself, and it can rely on our support. As far as the question of anti-Semitism here in Germany is concerned, it is necessary that we implement the laws, and all authorities in Germany plan to do so, and I discuss this with all those who bear responsibility, and we will continue to uphold and enforce the laws. And of course, we're going to use all legal alleys and avenues, and I made it clear in the German Bundestag that we are working on and are going to impose a ban on Hamas in Germany. We're also going to ban associations in order to make sure that there are no anti-Semitic and xenophobic activities in Germany. And this is a matter dear to my heart because many things come into play. Anti-Semitism is often coupled with plans to divide society, and xenophobia in general. So in general terms, we need to be strong and work against this. We're going to do that and review if our legal options are enough. It is intolerable and unacceptable. And let me reiterate what I said in Germany. Who rejoices in the face of killing of people and who burns Israeli flags is committing crimes and is going to be persecuted for these crimes. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our press conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that was the press conferences given by Germany's Chancellor Scholz and King Abdullah of Jordan following their talks. Both leaders spoke of the deep and reliable relationship between the two countries. They very clearly both condemned the Hamas attacks. Chancellor Scholz, of course, reiterating Germany's support for Israel. And then both leaders went on to talk about the absolute importance of de-escalating this conflict to stop the violence from spreading. We're going to get more now from DW's Matthew Moore, who is at the Chancellery in Berlin. He's been covering this meeting for us. Matthew, we know that Chancellor Scholz will be on his way to visit Israel after this meeting. Tell us, first of all, what stood out for you from this press conference? What message was Chancellor Scholz sending, and how important is it that he is now travelling on to Israel?
Yeah, I think the message that came out of that was that both sides really strongly condemning the attacks last week, and also saying that they're stressing that de-escalation, that both sides want to avoid a wider regional conflict. I was struck that Chancellor Scholz said that from the beginning, that this was a shared stance, that Chancellor Scholz talked of the trust between the two countries, and he talked about he kind of praised Jordan and King Abdullah's role as a regional stabilising force in that neighbourhood. They also talked about the need, both of them talked about the need for humanitarian aid to get into civilians in Gaza. Chancellor Scholz mentioned water, food, medications, and Chancellor Scholz stressed, and I think this was interesting, and this was a kind of a statement, if you like, to his Israeli counterparts, that they need to differentiate between civilians and Hamas terrorists. Another thing that I thought stood out for me was King Abdullah saying that these are, of course, difficult circumstances that the two men are meeting under. And King Abdullah's been on a kind of European tour in the last few days, Anya, and Germany is the latest capital. And he said it was tragic and a difficult situation in Gaza. And they talked about the unacceptable suffering, both on a legal and a human level. And he thanked the two men thanked each other for their role in hosting refugees. But I was struck that my colleague Michaela Kufner asked King Abdullah whether Jordan would be willing to accept refugees should it come to it. And he said that that was absolutely a red line for Jordan and Egypt. They said that they do not want the plight of the civilians to be used to be pushed onto someone else's shoulder. That's not an answer to this. And so the two men really talked about the need for a two-state solution, get the process back on track. So a lot in there to throw forward into the Chancellor Scholz's meeting to Israel. And I'm sure he'll be taking some of that with him when he speaks to Prime Minister Netanyahu later this evening.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, as an immediate neighbour, Jordan is affected directly by the violence we're seeing between Israel and Gaza. That was very clear from what King Abdullah was saying. I mean, how likely is it that Jordan can play some kind of intermediary role? What role is Jordan playing here?
So Jordan is something of a peacemaker in the region, and I think that Chancellor Scholz talked about the need for dialogue in the region, and that the reason that he is meeting King Abdullah today, and that Chancellor Scholz will be travelling on to Egypt after his visit to Israel, shows the need that the solution is not going to be a simply Israeli solution. It's going to have to require regional powers, and King Abdullah is key to that, frankly. But I think that the focus, actually, for me, it felt like the focus was really on the immediate humanitarian crisis and averting that, and firstly getting aid to people in the region, but of course, and trying to encourage a de-escalation so that this doesn't become a wider regional conflict. So I think King Abdullah will and Jordan does have a role to play in that. But you heard him there say, we're not going to be accepting refugees, so the focus is really on de-escalation and not letting this spill over into the wider region.
DW correspondent Matthew Moore, thank you so much for that. You're watching DW News live from Berlin. Here's a quick reminder of our top story. Israel has carried out an airstrike in Rafah in southern Gaza. Now, this comes as President Joe Biden plans to visit the country on Wednesday. Israel's military strategy and war aims are set to top the agenda of the meeting with the government and the US president. And with that, you are up to date. Thanks so much for watching DW.